The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
The story in Sacramento is that Rich Gordon's spouse, Denny, is more popular than the Assemblyman. We talk about same-sex marriage with the chair of the Legislative LGBT Caucus. The game is marriage and civil rights. The game is on. I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game. Our guest today is Assemblyman Rich Gordon. He has represented the Peninsula in the Assembly since 2010. Prior to that, he served 13 years on the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. He and his spouse, Dr. Dennis McShane, have been in a committed relationship for more than 30 years. It's longer than a lot of marriages, I know. And on August 16th, 2008, you better not forget the anniversary, they were married in Half Moon Bay. Gordon is chair of the Legislative Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Caucus, and welcome back to the game. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Let's talk about same-sex marriage a little bit. Why does it matter? Why is it important? Is it important legally? Is it important symbolically? Or is it both?
It's both. Symbolically, it's important because I think it really does represent the true equality for gay and lesbian couples. Now, on a legal basis, it's very important because of rights that are granted to folks in committed relationships under the guise of marriage. Right now, Denny is at Social Security Medicare age. His copay is about 10 times what it would be if we were married. There's just such a difference in tax law and so many other things that come into play. So it's important.
Yeah. Now, you guys were together for 30 years. There was a window of time during which you could get married, but why? What brought that decision to you? I mean, I'm sure you weighed whether or not to do it, whether or not it made sense. So how did you reach that? What's the process of making that decision?
Well,
and a better question, is it different for you than it was for other people, for heterosexual couples?
Well, I think key difference was that we had recently celebrated our 25th anniversary together. And shortly after that, the Supreme Court ruling in California came out to allow marriage. For us, we had a 25-year courtship. And so the decision was fairly easy, frankly. We were in a committed relationship. And the ability to provide a visible symbol to our family and friends of that commitment, and also to accrue the rights that commitment would bring, was important to us. So actually, the morning that the Supreme Court ruling came down, we'd had a discussion before the news was announced and said, if this goes affirmative, we're going to get married. And so we'd already proposed to each other, essentially, when we heard the news.
Mm-hmm. Well, so let me ask you, you've been living together for a long time. I know lots of couples, heterosexual couples, who are living together and don't feel the need to get married. So how does this fit into that? Is there some distinction that most people don't understand, or is it that it really is no distinction and that's what people don't understand?
Well, I think it's no distinction. Yeah. For us, it was just the right thing to do in terms of symbolizing our commitment. And that was important to us. It was important for us to be able to say to folks, this is a true representation of our commitment to each other. For us to be able to wear wedding rings and to say to folks, we're legally married, that was important.
Is there a difference between a commitment and a marriage?
The only difference for us is that we had a great big party. We were able to symbolically say that, we are married, but we're also legally allowed to say we're married. So the commitment was always there. Now we also have the legal documents.
Yeah. The legalese, a lot of people suggest it could be accomplished by legalizing civil unions. And that was sort of the fallback position for people who didn't want to support gay marriage but didn't want to oppose gay unions. What's wrong with a civil union versus why is it important to have a specific wedding?
Well, I think it's more than just language. A civil union has a very different connotation in our society than the word marriage. And you can theoretically provide the same kinds of rights, but then why not call it the same? Why not have it be equal? And so inherently, civil unions were always unequal to marriage, just by definitional purposes.
Mm-hmm. There's something about this I think I'm not getting to, which, and maybe it's because it's not, there's not sort of a logic to it necessarily or a reason to it so much as there's an emotional component to it of the nature of relationships. That you can dissect relationships from the scientific point of view, but that's not what they are. Is that valid, you think? Is there something about it that a lot of people just don't get, and probably me included?
Well, I guess it. I think that as human beings, we come together. Throughout time, we have bound together in relationships, and certainly in our society, the coming together of two individuals in a marriage has been a long tradition. It's been the way in which we create the unions in our lives. Mm-hmm. And so I do think it's important that all of our community have the capacity to have these kinds of unions, these kinds of relationships. And I think while symbolic, it's also, I think, very, very important in terms of clarifying our place and our role.
Mm-hmm. There's another element we haven't talked about, which is that sense of being equal to others that I think is part of the conversation too, I suppose. Can you talk about that a little bit? What does that mean?
Well, yeah, I think when for 25 years, I think Denny and I always felt that we were a little bit second class to others. We both have two sisters, and our sisters were married. And I think at some level it was always, well, they're married, but we're not, and were we different? And now we have the same rights that they do.
Yeah. Is being gay sort of a ticket to being a societal outsider a little bit? Is that less true now than it was maybe 20, 25 years ago?
Oh, I think it's absolutely less true. Yeah. I think, I was very slow in coming to grips with my sexual identity. I was 34 years old when I finally came out. Mm-hmm. And I look back now and think about how difficult that was for me. And part of the reason it was so difficult was that I felt that if I came out and said, to the world, I'm gay, that I would be scorned, I would be discriminated against. At that time, there was this was 1982, mm-hmm. There was no job protection. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I came out, there was some serious question whether, I could continue my professional work or not. So I think there's a way in which at one point, clearly in our history, there was a time when you opened yourself to discrimination by being open about being gay. I think that's far less true today for a variety of reasons. One is that there are additional legal protections, but also I think the other change that has happened in our society is that as more and more LGBT individuals have come out, we're a part of the fabric of communities now. People know us. It's really easy or easier to discriminate against someone when you don't know them, don't know who they are. It's easier to make them the kind of a person that you don't want to be around. But when you know someone, it's harder to discriminate.
It's a great time to take a break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon, and over here we have Assemblyman Rich Gordon. He was also chair of the Legislative LGBT Caucus, and we're talking about same-sex marriage, gay rights, civil rights. The people who are against same-sex marriage say that it undermines traditional marriage and undermines traditional values. What's your reaction to that?
I see things in exactly the opposite way. I think that same-sex marriage is a traditional value. It's a value of upholding and supporting relationships, affirming the right of people to be together, and I think actually it brings greater stability to our communities. So I think it has a very positive value.
How does it bring greater stability? I mean, the premise is that Judeo-Christian society was founded on the marriage between a man and a woman, and the structure of a family that emanates from that.
Well, increasingly, gay and lesbian couples are having families.
Which is also making the same people a little crazy.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. But we are part of the fabric of the community. And the incredible civil rights advances that have occurred over the last several decades in this regard bring us, I think, to the point where it is clearly time for full acceptance. Marriage and family, is a key part of that for all of us.
Mm-hmm. The idea, though, is this isn't what marriage is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a particular thing for the structure of society. And I wonder if it suggests a lot of people don't understand where our sexuality comes from. Some of the same people think that it's a lifestyle or a choice. And I would imagine to have to make this decision at the age of 34 is not something, you're thinking, well, I think I'll go gay now. It isn't as, it's more of a driving force than people understand, I think.
Mark, it's not a choice.
Yeah.
Why would you choose to be discriminated against? Why would you choose, as I did in 1992, to come out knowing that I might lose my profession, my job? Yeah. Why would I choose to do that?
How long before that did you know you were gay? How long did you wrestle with the decision of coming out?
I was struggling for over a decade, since college years.
And mostly the fear was of ostracism and...
Yeah, ostracism, that I couldn't be a part of a community. I'd have to. I kept thinking, I grew up here in San Mateo County. Mm-hmm. This has always been home. This is my community, and I kept thinking, well, if I come out, I'm going to have to move to the ghetto in San Francisco and live on Castro Street. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a part of this community. So part of it was, there were a whole set of negative messages that I had received for a long time in my life about gay people. There was the open discrimination. So I think a lot of folks feel it's perhaps a choice, but I think there's increasing evidence, scientific evidence that shows that this is not something people choose. Mm-hmm. This is inherent in who we are. It's an essential core of our being. But it also, I don't think, should necessarily fully define us. Mm-hmm. I'm a member of the state legislature and I'm a chair of the LGBT Caucus, but I don't consider myself the gay legislator. I'm the assemblyman who represents these communities here on the peninsula. I happen to be gay, but I don't necessarily go to Sacramento with a gay agenda. I go to Sacramento with the agenda for my community. And that's what I work on.
Yeah. The same people who were worried that it undermines traditional marriage worry that it opens the door to further breakdown of marriage, that if you allow same-sex marriage, then how do you prevent polygamy? How do you prevent, cross-species marriage?
I think that at some level, I feel like those are kind of specious arguments that get us try to take it to an extreme. What we're talking about is the very traditional contract between two people. And maybe the other thing to keep in mind about this issue of marriage is that marriage is not a religious activity. Marriage is a contract that the state allows between two individuals. It is actually a governmental activity. Now, marriages can be sanctioned by the church, blessed by the church, be a part of the church. But it's not even necessary to go to a church to get married. So marriage is a contractual agreement, and nothing precludes folks from also having it to be a very spiritual, religious experience.
So if same-sex marriage becomes legal in California, churches will not be required to perform them.
No, I don't believe that any church should ever be required to perform a same-sex marriage. Yeah. It is there's routes to civil marriage, and there will be many churches who will embrace it and support it.
It was only 5 years ago that Proposition 8 passed in California, and it's you've seen the same poll figures I have, that if it were on the ballot now, it would be defeated by almost the same margin by which it passed 5 years ago. I can't think of an issue where public opinion has changed, an issue as emotional as this one has been, where public opinion changed so dramatically in such a short period of time. And I think, I wonder if you have some sense of why that's been happening.
Well, I share the same thoughts that you do about, my goodness, this is happening quickly. Yeah. I think there's two things. All the polling shows that there's a lot of this is generational. Mm-hmm. And so our society's demographics are moving in the direction for more inclusiveness. But I also think that folks have had the opportunity to see in California 18,000 couples who are married, couples like Denny and myself. And I don't necessarily think they look at us and feel like the world has fallen apart since we got married. And as I said earlier, as more and more people come out, both as gay and lesbian, but also as married same-sex couples, I think people say, so what's wrong with that?
But the idea that it breaks down further and makes legal things like polygamy, you think it's got nothing to do with the issue? It
has nothing to do with the issue.
Yeah. We're going to take another quick break. Don't go away. This is good stuff. And you stick around too. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon, and we're joined by Assemblyman Rich Gordon. Rich and his spouse, Dennis McShane, got married on August 16th, 2008. That's only 5 days after my anniversary, so we should party
That'll help
together.
me remember it.
I'm sure, yeah. It's an important thing to remember. We're talking about Prop 8, California, changing attitudes. Does it bother you that California doesn't have same-sex marriage and other states do? There are a lot of people who think, if any place should have it, it should be California.
It's a great irony in many ways that a state that on so many issues is progressive does not yet have gay marriage. But I look at it and I know that it's a matter of time. And perhaps our court case on Prop 8 from California has, I think, actually been beneficial nationwide. The fact that this has now been in front of the Supreme Court, that it has allowed and caused members of the Senate and Congress, it's caused our president to come out and make statements. It's changed the entire national dialogue. So maybe we don't yet have marriage, but I think we have contributed tremendously from California in informing the national dialogue, changing national opinion, and moving this great civil rights issue forward.
It was interesting watching the coverage of the Supreme Court arguments because the folks who were in theory defending marriage seemed to have a lot of trouble sort of making their case. And I think that speaks to the point you're making, that that kind of debate helps move everybody.
Yeah.
What's your feel for what the Supreme Court might do, knowing that you're no particular expert on it?
I suspect that we see two results. On the California case, Prop 8, I suspect that there's a very narrow ruling, which essentially says that the court probably doesn't have jurisdiction, which would allow the appellate decision to stand. And that would open the door for gay marriage in California only. Mm-hmm. So they're not making a sweeping national statement.
Right.
On the federal case on the Defense of Marriage Act, I think that it's likely that that might get overturned, mm-hmm. And therefore would allow those states that choose through their own processes to allow same-sex marriage. Individuals in those states would then have access to the same level of federal benefits that heterosexual married couples have.
Are you okay with sort of an incremental step, or would you prefer to see it legalized nationally?
Well, my preference would be to see it legalized nationally, but I'm very comfortable with incremental steps. Yeah. The tide of this civil rights movement is moving forward. It's moving at a pace that I never expected it to move at. And so I know that we will reach a point where this debate we will look back at and say, wasn't that an odd thing to talk about? Yeah. That day will come.
Why do you think Prop 8 passed in California in the first place? Because you would have guessed that California was ahead of the curve on that issue.
Well, I think variety of reasons. I don't think that the issue had been quite ripened enough in California, particularly in certain communities. Mm-hmm. If you look at the exit polling on Prop 8, obviously did not do well in Latino communities, in African American communities. There have been some shifts there in this regard. So I think part of it was there wasn't enough exposure. You can also look at the specifics of the campaign, and the No on 8 campaign was not particularly well run, had some problems, and the Yes on Prop 8 campaign was highly funded. So traditional politics as well as an issue that wasn't quite yet ripe.
Yeah. I can remember when women first started showing up in the legislature in substantial numbers, which gives you an idea of how old I am. But the caucus has 9 members?
We have 8 members.
8 members.
And we're the largest caucus, legislative caucus in the United States at this point.
Mm-hmm. And the question, I guess, is what sort of barriers do you see breaking down? We were talking off the air about Denny, who I also know, who probably enjoys going to the spouse events, that historically were very much female, housewife almost oriented. Are there things that provide you an opportunity to say to people, things are different? That doesn't mean they're bad. They're just different.
Yeah. Well, when I was sworn in December of 2010, the state legislature, also being sworn at the same time was Toni Atkins, lesbian from San Diego. Toni and her partner are married. Mm-hmm. Denny and I are married. It was the first time ever that two same-sex spouses went to the spouse training for new members. It was an interesting dynamic. They did have to shift the training a little bit. But at the end of the day, Denny bonded with folks and was exchanging recipes with people. So, things are all the same.
Rich Gordon, thank you so much for being here to talk about this issue. We'll see you again soon. And you stick around next time we come around, next time on the game. Stay with us or come back or whatever it is I'm trying to say. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on the game. I'll get to it eventually. Thanks, Rich.